Champion Louis is in the all-dark trunks. Challenger Buddy Bear has the stripe on his trunks. This is the second meeting of these two men.
He was the most dominant boxer of his generation, a world champion, a war hero, and a symbol of pride for Black America during a time of deep racial division. Joe Louis was more than an athlete. He was a legend. But while the world watched him break barriers in the ring, few paid attention to what was happening at home. Behind the headlines, he was also a husband, a father, and like many fathers in the spotlight, a man whose children carried a legacy they never asked for. So who were the kids of the Brown Bomber? What was it like growing up with the weight of an American icon as your last name? And what happened to them after the final bell rang? This is the story of fame, family, and life in the shadow of greatness. This is what happened to Joe Louis's kids. And if you are into classic Hollywood icons, amazing stories, and newly discovered insights, then hit that subscribe button. We are on our way to 10,000 subscribers, and your support will mean a lot to our channel. Before he was a legend, Joe Louis was just Joe, a quiet, determined young man born in Alabama in 1914, raised in a large family that knew struggle all too well. His rise in boxing was fast and ferocious, and by the mid-1930s he had become a household name. But as Joe Louis was climbing toward greatness, his personal life was also changing. In 1935, he married Marva Trotter, a college-educated model and socialite from Chicago. Their wedding was headline news. He, the humble boxing sensation; she, elegant and poised. Together, they looked like royalty in the black press. Just a few years later, they welcomed their first child, Jacqueline "Jackie" Barrow, born in the late 1930s. In 1943, while Joe was serving during World War II in a morale-boosting role, their son was born, Joe Louis Barrow Jr. He was named after the champ himself, but life as the children of an icon wasn't as glamorous as it looked from the outside. Joe's fame was global. He was earning huge purses in the ring, making appearances at White House dinners, and standing as a symbol of hope for a segregated America. But the demands of his career and his personal struggles took a toll on his marriage. Joe and Marva divorced in 1945, only to remarry in 1946, and then divorce again in 1949. The instability at home became part of the backdrop to Jackie and Joe Jr.'s childhood. During this time, Joe Louis was still the reigning heavyweight champion. He defended his title 25 times, an unmatched record. But behind the scenes there were financial problems mounting, particularly with the IRS, which would later follow the family for decades. While Joe Louis was fighting in the ring, he was also fighting to hold his family together. And though he loved his children, the pressures of fame, finances, and personal demons often created distance. Still, for Jackie and Joe Jr., being a Louis came with expectations and a name that would both open doors and cast long shadows. Growing up as the son of Joe Louis came with a kind of fame that didn't fade when the cameras stopped rolling. Joe Louis Barrow Jr. was born into legacy, literally carrying his father's full name. But as he grew up, he quickly realized that carrying a name like that came with expectations and a weight few people could understand. In school, he wasn't just a student. He was Joe Louis's son. People expected him to fight, to box, to be tough, to somehow live up to one of the greatest fighters who ever lived. But Joe Jr. didn't want to live in the ring. He wanted to create a life of his own, one that didn't involve fists or titles. After finishing school, Joe Jr. served in the United States Army, a move that mirrored his father's wartime service, but also helped him establish discipline and identity on his own terms. Then he entered the world of corporate America, working in marketing and business development, far from the sports arenas his father once ruled. Later, Joe Jr. found his true calling in a different kind of arena, youth development and social impact. He became the CEO of the First Tee, a nonprofit that teaches life skills and character through the game of golf. He said in an interview, "My father opened doors." but I had to decide what to do once I walked through them. Through his work with the first tee, Joe Jr. impacted thousands of young people, particularly those from underserved communities, many of whom had no idea who his father was, and that was fine with him. While the world remembered Joe Louis as a champion, Joe Jr. was determined to be remembered as a leader, a mentor, and someone who quietly carried his father's legacy in a way that honored the man, not just the myth. He rarely spoke about his childhood in detail, but he always maintained a sense of loyalty to his father. Even through the financial hardships, the family instability, and the massive shadow that came with being the son of the Brown Bomber. By the time the 1950s came to a close, Joe Louis had already secured his place in history, but his life outside the ring was growing harder with each passing year. After retiring from boxing in 1949, he faced a brutal opponent that no punch could stop: the Internal Revenue Service. And if you are into classic Hollywood icons, amazing stories, and newly discovered insights, then hit that subscribe button. We are on our way to 10,000 subscribers, and your support will mean a lot to our channel. Despite earning millions over his career, Joe Louis owed the IRS over $1 million in back taxes, partly due to poor financial management, bad advice, and a tax system that offered no forgiveness. Almost everything he made later in life went straight to the government. He even came out of retirement briefly to try to pay down the debt, losing badly to younger fighters. The once revered champion ended up working as a greeter at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, reduced to shaking hands with tourists and smiling for tips. It was a fall from grace that stunned the public. But Joe Louis never complained. Throughout his final years, his children, especially Joe Louis Jr., watched as their father's dignity remained intact, even as his fortune disappeared. Behind the scenes, Joe Jr. began to take a more active role in managing what little was left of the family legacy. When Joe Louis passed away on April 12, 1981, at the age of 66, it was a deeply symbolic loss. One of the greatest American athletes of the 20th century died nearly penniless, but not forgotten. President Ronald Reagan approved a burial with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery, a rare honor for a sports figure. Joe Jr. and the family were present, quietly proud, and determined to ensure his father was remembered for more than just what he'd lost. From that point on, Joe Louis Jr. became the family steward, giving interviews, attending ceremonies, and working on projects that honored his father's contributions not just to boxing, but to America. He worked with schools, foundations, and boxing organizations to keep the Joe Louis legacy alive, not just as a champion, but as a symbol of strength, dignity, and perseverance. Joe Jr. once said, "People saw the fighter. I saw the man. And I've spent my life trying to honor both." As he grew older, Joe Louis Jr. continued to carry his father's legacy with quiet strength, but he also built a full life of his own. He was married twice and became a father himself, raising his own children with values shaped by both his father's public image and private struggles. Joe Jr. largely kept his family out of the spotlight, choosing to give them something he hadn't always had: privacy, peace, and emotional balance. Despite the fame in his bloodline, he never cashed in on his father's name. Instead, he dedicated his life to service, mentoring youth, promoting integrity in sports, and expanding access to opportunities through the First Tee, the youth golf nonprofit, where he served as CEO for over a decade. He believed that sport could change lives, just as boxing had changed his father's, and in a quieter way, his own. Joe Louis Jr. passed away in 2015 at the age of 78, surrounded by family. He was remembered not just as the son of a boxing legend, but as a man who honored legacy through humility, leadership, and love. And maybe that's the real story here. Joe Louis fought in front of millions. Joe Louis Jr. fought for the people no one saw. One conquered opponents in the ring, the other tried to help people conquer the obstacles in life. Both were champions in very different ways. So now we ask you, what would you do if the world expected you to become your parents' legacy? Would you follow their path or carve your own? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoy stories that go beyond the spotlight, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell so you never miss the stories behind the legends.